It was sitting in the corner of the room, completely brown, completely still, every leaf either curled into itself or already fallen onto the dry soil beneath it. The stem had gone brittle. The soil had pulled away from the edges of the pot, cracked and pale like the surface of a drought. Anyone who walked past it assumed it was finished, dead, beyond saving. And the person who owned it had already started thinking about throwing it out and starting over. But they did not throw it out. They did something instead, something small, something almost embarrassingly simple. And within 2 weeks, that plant pushed out a new leaf, bright green, soft, alive, and everything that person thought they knew about dead plants turned out to be wrong. Most people give up on a plant the moment it stops looking alive. The moment the color drains, the moment the stems go limp, the moment the soil dries to dust. They make a decision. They call it dead. They move on. But what they are actually looking at, in the majority of cases, is not a dead plant. It is a plant in crisis. A plant that has shut itself down to survive. A plant that is doing the biological equivalent of holding its breath, conserving every last resource it has, waiting, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months, for conditions to change. And the difference between a plant that recovers and a plant that truly dies is almost always whether a human being intervened at the right moment, in the right way, with the right understanding of what is actually happening beneath the surface. The first thing you need to understand is that plants do not die the way most people imagine. They do not switch off all at once. They retreat. When a plant faces extreme stress, whether from underwatering, overwatering, heat, cold, root damage, or nutrient starvation, it begins a process of triage. It sacrifices the parts that cost the most energy to maintain first. The oldest leaves go yellow and drop. The newest. Growth stops. The stems stop reaching. All of the plant's remaining energy flows downward, toward the roots, toward the base, toward the core of the plant where the growing tissue, the cambium layer just beneath the bark, is still alive and waiting. A plant can look completely dead above the soil while its root system is still quietly, patiently alive below it. And that root system is the key to everything. Before you do anything to try to save a plant that looks dead, you need to do one thing first. You need to scratch the stem. Take your fingernail or a small knife and gently scratch the surface of the main stem near the base, just deep enough to remove a sliver of the outer layer. If what you see underneath is green or white or even slightly moist and pale, the plant is alive. That color, that moisture, that softness under the outer layer is living tissue. It is the plant's version of a pulse. If the scratch reveals nothing but dry, hollow, brown fiber all the way through, then and only then are you truly dealing with a dead stem. But even then, the roots may still be alive. And as long as the roots are alive, the story is not over. Pull the plant gently from its pot. Look at the roots. Healthy roots, even in a severely stressed plant, are white or light tan, slightly firm and alive looking. If even a portion of the root ball shows that kind of color and texture, there is something to work with. The brown, mushy, or completely dried out roots are dead and need to be removed. Carefully, cleanly, with sterilized scissors or pruning shears, because dead roots left on the plant become a source of rot and disease that can spread to the living tissue. Trim everything that is clearly dead. What you're left with may look like very little. It may look like nothing. But if even a few white roots remain, what you have in your hands is not a dead plant. It is a plant with a future. Now the question becomes what kind of stress killed it in the first place, because the revival approach depends entirely on the cause. And this is where most people make their second mistake. They assume all struggling plants need the same thing, usually water, and they start pouring water onto a plant that may have been killed by too much water in the first place. Overwatering is actually the most common reason houseplants die, and it produces symptoms that look almost identical to underwatering: wilting, yellowing, dropping leaves, brown tips, because in both cases the plant is failing to move water through its system. The difference is the cause. In underwatering, the roots have no water to absorb. In overwatering, the roots have rotted from sitting in too much moisture and can no longer absorb water even when it is there. Pouring more water onto a root-rotted plant does not save it. It finishes it. So before you water, check the soil. Push your finger 2 inches deep into the soil near the base of the plant. If it feels wet or even just cool and slightly damp at that depth, hold off on water entirely. If it feels completely dry and pulls away from your finger without leaving any moisture, water is what the plantee needs. This 2-inch finger test is one of the most reliable tools in plant care, and it costs nothing. And yet most people either forget it or never learn it in the first place. Once you have identified the cause of the decline and addressed it, trimming dead roots, correcting the watering schedule, removing the plant from standing water, the next step is giving the plant the environment it needs to begin recovery. And recovery for a plant is not the same as normal growth. It is more like rehabilitation. The plant needs less stimulation, not more. Move it out of direct, harsh sunlight and into bright but indirect light. Reduce any fertilizer to 0 for the first few weeks, because fertilizer pushes growth, and a recovering plant does not have the energy reserves to sustain new growth while it is simultaneously rebuilding its root system. What it needs during this period is stability, consistent temperature, consistent moisture levels, consistent light, so that it can redirect every unit of energy it produces toward rebuilding the root system that everything else depends on. Humidity is one of the most underestimated tools in plant revival. When a plant is severely stressed, its leaves lose moisture faster than its weakened root system can replace it, which is why the leaves wilt and brown even when you are watering correctly. Increasing the humidity around the plant reduces that moisture loss through the leaves and gives the roots time to recover without the leaves continuing to deteriorate. You can do this by misting the leaves lightly once or twice a day, by placing a tray of water near the plant so it evaporates slowly into the surrounding air, or by grouping struggling plants together so they create a small pocket of shared humidity between them. None of these approaches costs anything, and all of them meaningfully reduce the stress load on a plant that is trying to come back. Pruning is the part that feels the most counterintuitive, and the part that matters the most. When you look at a struggling plant, every instinct tells you to protect what is left, to leave the remaining leaves alone, to avoid cutting anything that is still partially green, to preserve every visible piece of the plant. But the biology works against that instinct. Dead and dying leaves are not just passengers, they are active drains on the plant's limited energy reserves. The plant is still trying to maintain those dying leaves, still sending energy to tissue that cannot be saved, still attempting repairs on cells that are already beyond recovery. Every dead or dying leaf you remove is energy redirected back to the parts of the plant that can actually use it. Cut back hard. Remove every brown stem, every yellowed leaf, every dried out branch. It will look brutal. It will look like you have made things worse. But underneath that stripped back exterior, the plant will have more energy available for the living tissue than it has had in weeks. The soil itself is often part of the problem in a way that people rarely consider. Old potting mix breaks down over time. It compacts, loses its ability to drain properly, becomes hydrophobic in severe drought, meaning it actually repels water rather than absorbing it, so that water runs around the outside of the dried soil mass and straight out the drainage holes without ever reaching the roots. If you suspect this is happening, the fix is a technique called bottom watering. Place the pot in a tray of water and let it sit for 30 to 45 minutes, allowing the dry soil to slowly absorb moisture from below rather than from above. The capillary action of water moving upward through the soil rehydrates the entire root zone in a way that surface watering on compacted soil never achieves. After a session of bottom watering, the difference in how the soil feels, heavier, darker, properly moist throughout, is immediate and obvious. For plants that have truly hit rock bottom, no leaves remaining, stems cut back to near the soil line, just a few white roots, and the hope that the base is still alive. There is one more technique that experienced plant rescuers rely on. Wrap the bare stem and soil surface loosely in clear plastic wrap, or place the whole pot inside a clear plastic bag and seal it loosely at the top. This creates a miniature greenhouse effect around the plant, trapping humidity, stabilizing temperature, and reducing the moisture demands on the roots to almost 0 while the plant begins the slow process of regenerating new growth. Check it every few days, open it briefly to allow fresh air exchange, and watch for the first sign of a new bud or a tiny pale shoot emerging from a node on the stem. That moment, that first green pinpoint of new growth, is one of the most quietly extraordinary things a person who grows plants ever gets to witness. Because there is something in watching a plant come back from what looked like death that goes beyond gardening. It changes how you think about things. It is hard to watch a stem that looked completely finished push out a new green shoot without feeling something shift inside you. Hard not to make the connection to other things, other situations, other people, other moments in life that seemed beyond recovery and turned out not to be. Plants do not know they are. Point of visible failure and accept it as final. They hold on at the root level, at the cellular level, at the level that nothing from the outside can see, and they wait for conditions to change. And when conditions change, when someone scratches the stem and finds green underneath, when someone trims the dead roots and corrects the water, when someone moves them into the right light and increases the humidity and has the patience to wait, they come back. Every plant you save from what looked like death is a lesson in the same direction, that what looks finished from the outside is often, and still working on the inside, that the right intervention at the right moment changes everything, that giving up is almost always premature, and that the distance between dead and alive is, more often than not, exactly as far as a person is willing to look.